Dreams while you're feeling blue. Dreams, that's the thing to do. Dreams while there's smoke rings floating in air. You'll find your share of memories there. So dream.
This is Judd Hart speaking.
In the spring of 1892, workers cleaning brush out of Tongue Creek near the Gunnison River discovered the bodies of Eric, his horse, and his dog, apparent victims of an assault, armed robbery, and murder. No one was apprehended for the robbery and killings.
We lived in a big house, one of the better houses in Cedaredge at that time. But when I was 8 years old, he had gone to California and had gotten a job with the Edison Company, and he wrote to us that if we wanted to see him again, we had to come to California.
In the spring of 1928, Judd's father was once again lured over the horizon.
And we traveled all that summer up through that area. We picked berries, we picked the cherries and all kinds of fruit through the summer there. We did all kinds of things like that, making ends meet.
They arrived back in Cedaredge almost exactly a year before the October 1929 stock market crash and the beginning of the Great Depression.
Now this was in 1928, and my dad was able to get a job at a store, Wick's store, as a clerk there, and so we were getting along fairly well. We lived in some pretty shabby places for a while, rented. We got back to Cedaredge, and I started high school about a month late in the fall there with the class that I had started school with in 1920.
From 1929 through 1933, Judd's high school years, he participated in many activities. He was a drummer in the high school band. In 1932, he made the honor roll and was elected president of the Cedaredge High School Boosters Club. He played Dr. Cudham in the high school operetta, was elected president of the advanced agriculture class, and while in high school, joined the National Guard. He excelled in athletics, particularly so in basketball. But in 1933, midway through the basketball season, citing an obscure rule, Judd was declared ineligible for further league play. He was able to rejoin the team for the divisional championships, which they won. Outside of school, he was also active. He participated in the Methodist Church's Epworth League, a youth social organization. He and his friends skied and fished on Grand Mesa. Winter temperatures were cold enough that people ice skated on Fruit Growers Reservoir, then referred to as Hart's Basin. At the 1932 Delta County Fair, Judd was awarded top exhibitor ribbons in the poultry division. In 1933, fortune began to smile briefly once again upon Judd and his parents. Judd graduated from Cedaredge High School with 26 friends in the class of 1933. He cashed out his savings from the Pomona, California Savings and Loan. He planned to use the funds to start college. He had amassed $167, its inflationary worth about $3,944 today. In the autumns of those years, Judd and Amanda once again worked the fruit harvest, Judd picking and Amanda packing peaches and apples. In the summers of 1929 through 1931, Amanda worked as the cook for the Cedaredge Lumber Yards sawmill on Grand Mesa. Judd, at age 14 through 16, worked alongside his mother as her sous chef, hauling water a quarter of a mile from nearby springs, gathering firewood, and tending the cook fires. He also provided water to the sawmill crew. In payment, he received 10 cents per month from each crew member. In 1932, Judd, at age 17, started working on the sawmill crew. The sawmill's policy was to only hire people who had a debt at the lumberyard. Judd's pay was $2 per 10-hour day. Half his earnings went to settle Parker's lumberyard debt.
The start of 1933, and when Roosevelt had been elected president, postmasters changed with administrations.
At that time, U.S. post office jobs were political appointments, and Parker's brother-in-law, Robert James, had been appointed Cedaredge postmaster. Nepotism was condoned, and Judd's Uncle Bob hired Parker as a postal clerk. Because of the U.S. financial depression, the usual salary had been reduced by 15%. Still, Parker earned a steady $56 per month. Judd and some high school buddies hopped freight trains and traveled to and from California, living on loaves of bread and quarts of milk they could buy for a nickel apiece. Then, later in 1933, a black cloud once again washed over the Hart family.
It was that year, in 1933, that it was discovered that Dad had cancer.
His cancer diagnosis and radiation treatment sobered Parker. He realized he needed to provide a permanent home for his wife, Amanda. To that end, he began designing an architectural plan for a log cabin. There were practical reasons for building a log cabin. Logs were plentiful on Grand Mesa, and Parker had experience with logging. His father, Winfield Scott Hart, had briefly run a sawmill in Fulton, a small Alabama town amid its central pine forests. In addition, property taxes were substantially lower if the abode was a cabin rather than a house.
We found that this couple that were good friends of ours, Pittmans, they had 10 lots and a house on the corner of, or part of those lots. And they were just about to lose their property because they didn't have money to pay their taxes.
Parker paid back taxes on 5 of the 10 lots, and title was transferred to the Harts. The 5 lots were at the southeast corner of what was then B Street and Southwest 2nd Avenue. Later, B Street became Southwest 6th Street. For $15, Parker and Judd obtained a Grand Mesa timber harvesting permit from the U.S. Forest Service. They enlisted the help of Matti Kimbus, a man from Finland experienced in building log cabins. Kimbus recommended 8-inch diameter logs, and Parker and the forest ranger had hiked the permit area and selected stands of trees that would meet that parameter. Parker and Judd had the naive plan of harvesting logs and building the cabin, all in 1934. They were freed of that notion when Kimbus informed them they would have to cure the logs for a year or longer. Also in jeopardy was the 1934 log harvest itself. Because of the Depression, the local lumber yard had sold little lumber in 1933, and manager Glenn Kaufman planned not to run the sawmill in 1934. Typically, the mill cut up to 250,000 linear feet of lumber. Because of the local demand for cabins, the sawmill managers decided to cut lumber for private clients and to cut about 50,000 linear feet for themselves. Parker and Judd engaged Charlie Henderson to manage tree felling for them. Judd exchanged all his earnings to offset the loading and hauling of the logs for the Hart cabin and the cutting of logs into boards for the cabin project. Henderson and Judd cut and felled the spruce pine trees. Parker Jr., temporarily in the area from California, trimmed the peripheral branches. Henderson and Judd bucked up the logs into lengths recommended by Kimbus. They borrowed a team of horses from Parker Sr.'s brother, Leslie, and used it to drag the bucked up logs to a central place. The Harts hired Glenn Kaufman, who would load and haul the logs and the cut lumber to Cedaredge. In 1934, truck braking systems were susceptible to overheating and failure, especially trucks heavily loaded with logs going down steep grades. To prevent brake failure, the trucks had a water tank fastened under the frame on each side of the truck. Kaufman and Judd would fill the tanks before heading down the mountain. The tanks each had a tube that led to the braking system. Whenever the slope steepened, the driver would stop, get out, and turn a petcock valve that would allow water to wash over the brakes.
If it wasn't for that cold water on those brakes, why, they burned out the brakes in a hurry. Of course, you could get the smell of that water and the heat on it, because it'd come out of there and there would be steam, kind of steam coming from underneath those wheels that people could see.
Judd used the 1934 autumn months and a draw knife to strip the bark from the logs and treat them with an oil recommended by Kimbus. The logs were stacked in such a way to facilitate curing. Judd also bought a domestic water tap and dug a trench for piping to the property. The Harts owned a tent house and pitched it on the property. Parker and Amanda slept there, even during the winter of 1934-35. Because of the Great Depression, there were few jobs available in 1935. To create jobs, the Roosevelt administration established the Civilian Conservation Corps, which Judd joined at the beginning of 1935. Each CCC line worker earned $30 a month and was required to send $25 a month to his dependent family. Judd arranged to send his $25 to his mother Amanda, who saved the money for Judd's college. He was assigned to a work camp near Fruita, Colorado. Buffalo had been introduced in the Colorado National Monument, but the herd was roaming outside its boundaries and was ruining nearby peach orchards. The Fruita crew built 8-foot-high buffalo fence to keep the beasts within the monument boundaries. At that time, the city of Grand Junction had elected to discontinue its downtown trolley system. The CCC crew dug up the trolley's street rails and used them to span the canyons and support the fence at the monument. In the latter part of 1935, after the fence was completed, the Fruita crew worked on the monument's roadway. By then, Judd had been promoted to a lead position and was earning $35 a month, so he had the grand amount of $10 a month spending cash. Finally, in the summer of 1936, Judd and Mattie Kimbus built the log home on the Cedaredge property. Kimbus charged the Harts $50 for his labor. The job was done in 10 days. Judd hoisted the logs into place after Kimbus had dovetailed the ends. In addition to the dovetail joinery, they used 4-pound hammers to secure the linkage spikes into the 8-inch diameter logs. The result was an extremely sturdy 5-room log cabin home, matching Parker's architectural design, with a living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a narrow bathroom area that still stands today. Although there was a bathroom area, and Judd had paid for a bathtub, toilet, and sink, initially no plumbing was installed, and there was no septic field or dry well dug. Once occupied, the Harts still had to use the outhouse and carry in water. Judd's brother Harold had lived in Alamosa, Colorado, and while there, he had learned a bit of plumbing. So in 1937, Harold helped Judd plumb the bathroom and kitchen. In 1937, the family gathered at the newly finished home. To keep his post office job intact, when Parker was in Denver for cancer treatments or when too ill because of them, his daughter, Eileen, or when available, Judd worked his shift at the post office. The hope was Parker's cancer would be cured and the job would remain his. Judd would rise early and go to the post office and would build a fire in the coal stove to warm the interior. Judd's work ethic was noticed by the townfolk, and as a result, Postmaster Uncle Bob James hired Judd into a more stable clerk position. In 1936, 64% of Coloradans voted to establish an old age pension that provided $45 per month for the elderly. Parker qualified for this pension, and because of it and his cancer, he retired from the post office. Then, in 1938, postmaster positions became civil service jobs rather than being short-term political appointments. At that time, Judd began looking for opportunities outside the post office, and at the same time, at age 23, came to the realization that college was not likely to be in his future. In February 1938, cancer took Parker's life. In 1938, Judd's good friend Jack McAdams was working for the Delta County Recreation Department, and Judd often traveled to sporting events and helped coach with Jack. Then Jack accepted a more lucrative recreation position elsewhere, and the Delta County Recreation Director job was offered to Judd, who readily accepted. Although able to provide various recreational programs for Delta, Cedaredge, and the Surface Creek Valley, Judd's efforts were stymied in Hotchkiss and Paonia. In meetings with leaders in Hotchkiss and Paonia, Judd learned that those communities were led by staunchly Republican town councils, and that anything smacking of Roosevelt New Deal programs was a no-go there. While working as the Delta County Recreational Director, Judd coached youth ball teams, and his softball teams were able to beat teams from larger towns. That caught the attention of the Mesa County Recreational Director, who offered Judd the job of Assistant Mesa County Recreational Director. Seeing that his salary would increase from $45 a month to $63 per month, Judd transferred to Grand Junction. While working in Grand Junction, Judd secured a room at the YMCA, and in exchange for the room, worked up the Y's recreational programs and stoked the Y's coal stove fires twice a night. Boarding at the YMCA, down the hall from Judd, was the U.S. Naval Recruiter. Significant because Hitler's 1939 invasion of Poland and spring 1940 defeat of France led the United States ever closer to war and prompted its first-time peacetime draft.
Now it will be